Okay, so Payday 3's 16th update releases tomorrow, and although it isn't exactly packed with a whole host of content and additions, what it does bring to the table is some of the game's most polished and replayable content. Before we talk about the main edition of Update 16, the Delivery Charge Heist, it's worth noting that this update brings with it fixes to certain aspects of the game's menus, which previously prevented players from purchasing weapons or maybe even cosmetic items that would be displaying as locked behind a level of infamy that they had already achieved. I also believe that the duplicating loadout slots issue has been addressed in this update as well, so those two menu issues should be resolved. Most importantly though, and this really is the only new addition besides for the Delivery Charge Heist, there is now a pop-up that will display when you secure some loot. It's a simple returning feature from previous games in the franchise that adds a much needed element of feedback to securing loot on a given heist. Over the last few weeks, while I've been playing this new build of the game and switching back to the previous version to record gameplay for my recent videos, the lack of a loot secure indicator is something that I really started to miss. So even though it's hardly a game-changing addition, I will say from experience, it's honestly a very welcome addition. So, onto the meat and potatoes of Update 16, the Delivery Charge Heist. I played the heist in a video last week, spoke about it in a little bit more depth over the weekend, but now it's time for me to take a deep dive into everything the Delivery Charge Heist has to offer.
Alright fellas, let's do this. This is not the security guard. I'm here with my crew to rob the place.
As you can hear, Gustavo has proved once again that Payday 3's music is the single most consistent part of the game, cooking up yet another absolutely fantastic heist track, Grit and Steel. I've once again spotted a little bit of a callback to an iconic Payday 2 track in this piece of music as well. Gustavo has done this before with the Houston Breakout track, including a segment from the Hoxton Breakout track. Of course, that made a lot of sense given how Houston Breakout and Hoxton Breakout played off of each other thematically, but this time it's a little bit different. Grit and Steel doesn't reference the heist Delivery Charge takes major inspiration from Shadow Raid, instead seemingly sharing some similar notes with Payday 2's Death Wish track. It's not an exact match like the two Breakout heist tracks, and there's also less thematic significance there, so make of it what you will, but I do like listening out for those little references. A slightly more on the nose reference is just how much the Delivery Charge Heist has in common with Shadow Raid, a dockside warehouse heist with an emphasis on being a stealth sandbox. You'd be right in calling this heist Shadow Raid 2.0. This heist comes with a newly revamped approach to Favours. In an attempt to make them more significant than they have been in previous heists, each of the 4 new Favours have much more impact on the gameplay of Delivery Charge, with 2 of them adding whole new objectives, another making the heist harder to complete while remaining undetected, but also increasing the amount of loot at the depot, and the final one changing where the heist begins and ends. These are all absolutely excellent Favours that play into one of this heist's 2 main focus points, giving you, the player, more choice. The Road Rage Redux Favour adds an additional armoured transport vehicle to the heist, but this time you aren't able to break into it as you would any other at the depot. Instead, we need to steal the entire truck. We do this by tampering with the depot's records to show that the particular armoured transport vehicle we're there to steal is scheduled for maintenance, and then we use the same remote steering device from the Road Rage heist to escort it out of the depot, ignoring the hacking step if you decide to go in loud. At that point, we're not really bothered about covering our tracks. It's an exceptionally difficult challenge in stealth, one I'm still yet to complete myself despite multiple attempts, even though I'm sure the community will trivialize this in no time at all. It's a really entertaining favour to bring with you on the heist. There are elements of RNG that affect this favour as well. The truck we need to boost can spawn in one of two areas. The remote steering wheel itself can also spawn in a couple of different places, and of course, depending on where you spawn at the start of the heist, the flatbed truck that you need to escort the vehicle to might be placed differently as well, which of course means that the armoured transport truck takes a different route. That's a lot of randomization for just a single favour to introduce to a heist. If you're playing on an easier difficulty with the Road Rage Redux favour, the location of the remote steering device will be marked for you pretty much as soon as Shade mentions that you need it. On harder difficulties, however, you're left on your own to figure out where the device has spawned for quite some time. In case you get really stuck, it will eventually be pointed out to you with a waypoint, but this really does take quite a while. The heist incentivizes exploration and encourages you to learn all of the spawns if you want to be able to complete it with haste. The next favour also follows the approach of taking an objective from a heist that already exists within the game and adding it to Delivery Charge. The Refrigerated tech favour places a couple of Wixia shipping containers around the heist, each containing a Wixia processor. This is the same degradable loot type from 99 boxes, and in much the same way, you'll have to secure them in a refrigerated truck within a certain amount of time before the loot's value degrades. Securing these valuables within the time limit actually nets you a significant amount of progress towards the minimum loot you need to secure before you're able to complete the heist, so it speeds up the heist quite drastically. To get into these shipping containers, you'll need a red keycard, and then to access the actual processors themselves, you'll need a set of fingerprints that you can get from the mugs in the main office. If I'm being completely honest, this favour is more enjoyable to use than completing the entire 99 boxes heist. The next favour is slightly different. Instead of just adding an additional objective to the heist, max capacity sees you taking on the heist when the depot is completely stocked. This means it takes the guesswork out of where most of the loot will be, as the majority of the cash will be located in the depot's main vault. But to counterbalance the simplicity this favour adds to the heist, security has been elevated to a much higher level. You'll now have to contend with a handful of camera drones both in and outside of the depot. A straightforward favour, but an effective one nonetheless. The last favour is even more straightforward though. The boat arrival does exactly what it says on the tin. You'll start the heist and escape using a rubber dinghy at the waterfront. This also acts as an additional loot secure point. Conveniently, any loot that ends up in the water respawns at the little platform next to the boat, so if you're emptying the vault through the side door, you can just chuck the money bags straight into the river and secure them all later. Equally, if you're up on the roof, or maybe even in the main office, just chuck any bags you may be carrying out into the water and they'll be conveniently piled up for you next to the boat. This is actually the case regardless of if you take the boat arrival favour or not, so if for any reason you think it would be helpful to quickly move the loot onto that little platform, you can use that little trick. These favours are all great in their own right. They each bring something new to the table and cause you to approach the heist slightly differently. Because these favours are so significant, for the first time we're actually able to buy them directly from Gage in the menus. Even though I can certainly see that these have been added as favours in order to give you more control over the way in which you experience the heist, I think these all would have been far better suited as potential random events. Instead of giving us the choice of which of these modifiers we'd like to apply on a chosen run, I think it would be so much stronger if they each had their own percentage chance of occurring at random. Perhaps with the exception of the boat arrival. I think that one kind of works very well as a favor. Maybe we would still have the option to force them to occur using the favors. Giving them each a random chance to be present means that the heist would feel that much more alive, and not to mention, it would also give solo players the opportunity to experience multiple of these additional objectives within a single run. You can use all 4 of these favors at once if you're playing with 4 players, and each person brings their own favor, but because of how the solo mode works right now, it's impossible to do an all favors solo run, which I think is a really big missed opportunity. I suppose there are ways you could do a solo all favors run by getting other players to join your lobby, equip certain favors, and then leave once the heist started, but that seems like more hassle than it's worth, and something that should be easily avoidable. Anyway, further to player choice, randomization is another key component of this heist. There are a number of different objects in the environment that have a random chance of being present. These can often be climbed on to give you access to new areas of the heist. It's likely that if a particular object is missing, there is another way for you to get to a specific area, so it's not like you're really able to roll RNG that will completely block off certain locations. Sometimes though, you have to get as creative as you can to access certain spaces. One of the most rewarding moments I had while playing this heist was trying to get into the main office without a red keycard that you usually need. I noticed that the ceiling light looked close enough to the catwalk that I thought there was a chance that I might be able to jump up onto it, and I was super impressed to find out that I could. Then, taking that one step further by smashing the window and jumping straight into the office. I had managed to get in there without using the keycard that is otherwise mandatory. There are a number of different little intricacies to the environment like this that just make the heist feel so much more like a sandbox. For example, there's a way to access the rooftop by jumping up on top of a camera and then climbing up from there. This heist truly invites you to explore its layout and try to think outside of the box when it comes to navigating the environment. There are also little tricks you can pick up on to help you with certain aspects of the heist. For example, you can throw bags over the wall directly into the sewer secure points if you learn how to perfectly line yourself up. You're also able to push guards into the water to hide their bodies, but be careful doing this one. If you don't answer their pager before pushing them in, you won't be able to, which could potentially ruin your stealth run. I would have loved if pushing a guard into the water before their pager went off would have actually prevented it from sounding. It would have made for a really unique trick to save a pager on the guard that's often patrolling the waterfront, as you can shoot them straight into the water. And if you were able, or I should say insane enough, to lure the lead guard all the way to the waterfront using something like throwing knives, it could be a really unique way of dealing with that lead guard as well. But unfortunately, that's not a thing. The heist lets you get creative in the way in which you approach it. We've spoken about it for long enough without actually having gone through how it plays from start to finish yet, so let's not wait any longer. You'll spawn in either directly in front of or to the right hand side of the depot. From there, you can walk around the entire perimeter of the place and choose from no less than 7 different ways of getting past the outer wall on harder difficulties. On easier difficulties, the gates next to each security checkpoint will be open, making for even more entry points. Once inside, you can search the car park for QR codes to access the armored transport vehicles if any have spawned for you. It's important to remember that this heist is heavily affected by randomization, so depending on how lucky you get, or even which favors you bring with you, there may or may not be any vehicles to loot outside. You should also keep an eye out for key items like RFID fobs or blue keycards that you might need to get inside the actual depot itself. Once you're ready to head inside the building, there are about 13 different entry points to get inside there as well. Each one is a balance of risk versus reward. The entry points that can get you directly into some of the more advantageous rooms are a little bit harder to reach without getting spotted. 4 out of those 13 entry points put you straight into one of the ventilation networks. There are 3 separate ventilation systems that each connect different areas of the depot. The easier a particular vent is is to access, the less likely it is to connect you to somewhere significant, whereas some of the harder to reach vents take you straight into key locations like the main office. Other ways of entering the building involve snatching an RFID fob, using a blue keycard as we said before, smashing your way through a window, or jumping through a window that somebody has already smashed for you. Once inside the depot, you may have more armoured transport vehicles to loot in the main warehouse or even in the side garage. In stealth, the armoured transport vehicles will always require a QR code to get inside, but when going loud, each truck needs you to wait for it to be hacked open before you can steal the contents. The garage in particular is quite a fun place to have loot spawn in when going loud, as there are a number of different ways of breaching the armoured transport vehicles. You can hack them as you would any of the other vans on the heist, or you can go underneath them to place down a drill which will get you inside faster than the hacking. This is the same tactic that we used on Road Rage, but if there happens to be a winch that spawns behind one of the vans, you can hook it up to get in even faster than the drilling. While you wait, there are a bunch of different gated off rooms that will all need to be drilled in loud or opened with a red keycard during stealth. But be warned, once inside, you'll have to disable the die packs on most of the cash in these rooms. The number of money piles in each room is randomized, so sometimes you may think that you've disabled all of the die packs just to find out there was one more you hadn't spotted yet. This has happened to me quite a few times while playing, and is actually quite a clever use of the die packs mechanic in combination with RNG. Finally, there's the big main vault. On lower difficulties, this will just require a 4-digit PIN number to be entered into the keypad next to it to get the door to open. That combination can be found in the main office. It'll either be projected onto the wall, but if the projector is switched off, you'll have to open the vault hidden behind the painting to get the code. On harder difficulties, however, you'll also need to scan a red keycard before you're able to use the keypad. Back in the main office, there's also a helpful drawing on the whiteboard that shows you which vehicles have cash in them, so it's always worth checking out that whiteboard anytime you're in there. Once you get access to all of the loot, it's time to secure it. In stealth, you'll be able to secure loot either back at the escape van, even though this isn't actually telegraphed to the player, or you can drop off your bags in the sewers. There are a number of different sewer grates dotted all over the heist, and on each run, a random selection of them will be designated as loot drop-off points. If you're taking on the heist in loud, however, there are a number of different randomized escapes. The most straightforward is a simple helicopter pickup from the roof. You'll signal Bile, he'll arrive moments later, secure the loot, and be on your way. The second escape method involves assembling a cage to secure all of the loot, and then standing inside it will let you escape the heist. The final escape point is located at the back of the depot and involves securing all of the loot in a shipping container that's brought over from around the corner by crane. These are all strong escapes. I haven't really found myself preferring one more than any of the others. They were all fun to play around, and the element of randomization keeps the heist feeling fresh. Even though that's a complete rundown of the Delivery Charge Heist from start to finish, there are 2 random events that can happen while you play the heist. If you remain in stealth, there is a chance for another van to arrive at the depot, bringing with it more loot for you to steal. And there's also a chance for there to be an extra armoured transport vehicle inside the heist when you begin that will leave the heist anywhere between 2 to 3.5 minutes after you start. If the vehicle leaves the heist before it's looted, you'll miss out on a couple of bags, but not to worry, if you do miss your window, the all bag bonus adjusts so that you don't have to reset. If you don't want to rush straight to that vehicle, you can sabotage the gates to prevent it from leaving in the first place, so you can come back to it at a later point. I believe these 2 events have a roughly 10% chance of occurring, and although you don't see them so frequently, when you do see them, it's a nice reminder that Payday 3 now has a heist with solid randomization. All of this comes together to create the Delivery Charge Heist, which is far and away the best stealth heist in the game. And if I'm honest, an argument could be made that this is also the best loud heist as well. The heist is genuinely fantastic and excels in almost everything it tries to do. If this is a taste of what future Payday 3 heists could look like, bear in mind this heist was still mostly developed during the rocky parts of Year 2, I am certainly excited to see what's in store for us during Year 3. There are a few things to note about this heist that I wouldn't necessarily say are drawbacks, but are worth mentioning anyway. Firstly, even though this heist is a shining example of what stealth in Payday 3 can truly be, it doesn't actually leverage all all of the mechanics that are a big part of what makes Payday 3's stealth such a drastic improvement upon the previous two titles. There isn't a single private area, meaning none of the social stealth mechanics can be put to any use at all throughout this heist. And secondly, as this heist is clearly geared more towards stealth, I rarely found myself starting off approaching it in stealth and then going loud if I got caught, which was a big selling point of Payday 3's approach to heist design. There are many heists in the game that you can start in stealth, but don't necessarily feel like you have to reset if you get into some trouble and need to go guns blazing for the second half of the heist. Delivery Charge doesn't really have that in common with a lot of the other heists in Payday 3, and actually feels a lot more like a classic Payday 2 stealth heist than anything we've seen in the third game up until now. There is, of course, the price tag shaped elephant in the room. $8 is a decent amount to fork over for a single heist in a game that's future is still relatively uncertain for now. It's not for me to tell you how to spend your money, but I wouldn't be surprised if there are players out there that won't be willing to pay the price of admission, regardless of how genuinely fantastic this content is. The absence of a new weapon or anything else in this DLC pack is quite noticeable, especially with what seems to be the RPK front and center of this heist's key art. Let me know if you're going to be picking up the Delivery Charge DLC when it releases tomorrow, and if you have enjoyed this video, all I ask is that you consider subscribing. Year 3 is just around the corner, officially beginning on September 21st, and I'm hoping we don't have to wait too long until we hear more about what Starbreeze's plans are for this pivotal year. If you want to catch up on everything the new CEO, Adolf Christiansen, has been saying about Year 3 so far, you can click the video on screen now. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.